All right, good morning. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It's Monday, October 7th, 2024. It's 9:06 a.m. My name is Ty Menser, Chair of the Board, Commissioner Vice Chair Wayne Fournier, Commissioner Edwards, and Commissioner Mejia participating virtually. We have County Manager Leonard Hernandez, Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. We have public virtual attendance available on the Thurston County YouTube channel. We'll be doing back-to-back presentations from elected officials this morning on budget-related items, and presumably wrapping up somewhere near noon hour, and then more this afternoon. So, County Manager.
Yeah, I just want to start. Thank you so much, Chair. I want to thank all of our elected leaders and their offices for the work that they've done in the budget every year. It's a lot of work that goes into it. And we have a lineup today of folks who have submitted budget requests. And we are going to put a quick presentation up. Amy, if you get this ready. It just gives, we can make sure it's shared, it just gives the board a quick overview of the requests. And we'll start off with the coroner. Hand over to you to take it away.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Gary Warnock, Thurston County Coroner, and to my right is one of 6 of my deputies, Tracy McCullough. She's got some presentation information as well. We are before you this morning for a midterm budget amendment asking for an additional $225,000 to cover the expense of autopsy costs. Right now, I think we're on target to spend $607,000 in autopsies. And also, I'm requesting, I know it's not the time, but I am requesting a full-time chief deputy position. I told Leonard this a couple months ago. I feel like I'm an overpaid secretary. I am buried in admin. I have no support. We do have a full-time office assistant, but that's not enough support for me when I'm in meetings, on vacation, or just out of the office period. So I'm requesting that as well. Go ahead.
I'd like to speak about the Chief Deputy Coroner position. We respectfully request this position and acknowledge that it is not a good time to ask for an FTE. We do appreciate the opportunity to bring this critical need to you. In our office, the duties of a chief are not done at all, or the absolute minimum is done to get by. And here are a few ways a chief will benefit our county and the office. A chief is essential for our office to operate more efficiently and effectively. A chief will update our office policies and procedures and our mass fatality plan, both of which are years outdated. A chief will participate in county meetings, which are currently unattended by the coroner's office. A chief will immediately be tasked with office accreditation, which is long overdue and required by law in 2025. The benefits to the county when our office is accredited include autopsy reimbursements at the highest value and continued revenue from morgue use fees by fellow counties. A chief will bolster leadership within our office, increasing vital support to our death investigators and to our coroner. We know the coroner's office is not most people's favorite place to be, and many do not realize the multiple aspects to our jobs as medical legal death investigators. Every workday we are inundated with death, diligently conducting investigations as to why and how someone died and helping distraught and overwhelmed families navigate the worst days of their lives. Here are a few excerpts from cards and letters to our office. I'll read just a few portions. We can't begin to thank you for all of your thoughtfulness and support you showed us when our son passed away. Many telephone calls, talking so many times with us as our lives shattered, continuing to be a support for us. All that you have done for us will always be remembered and is greatly appreciated, more than you can ever know. Every day you are with someone experiencing day one of learning that the world they were just living in is no longer. You give comfort to people walking into a nightmare. I've been reflecting on your job and how it takes such love, compassion, kindness, and poise to deal with tragedy, violence, and trauma that can accompany a death. Daily facing negative attitudes of anger, indifference, callousness, or extreme grief and the unexpected. Thank you for the sacrifice you give, bringing dignity to one of the most difficult times people experience in this life. And a stack of cards and letters here saying similar things. However, we're also recipients of extreme negative emotions, including being physically attacked and hearing harsh words said against us. While these reactions are completely understandable, they do add another layer of darkness to our jobs. Currently, our stellar team of investigators are struggling. A chief will provide foundational support to our office through much needed structure, regard, and accountability. We are eager to have a chief in our office, and we implore you for approval of the position. Thank you.
I realize I only need 3 approvals, but I'm asking for 5 votes on the board for this, so we get your full support.
Questions? I can't see the other commissioners. Is there a way to put their thumbnails up there so I can see hands or?
Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, Commissioner Edwards, go ahead.
Gary, when I last talked to you, you said you were going to come up with a financial plan that possibly could cover this. Did you come up with anything that might help?
I don't recall that conversation, Commissioner.
And Chair, if I could, the board today is just receiving the information and can ask questions of the elected offices. The decision-making isn't today. This is just an opportunity for folks for the elected offices and their leaders to report out or to ask questions and engage, but there won't be any motions made today.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from board members?
No, but thank you for clarifying that, because that was kind of my understanding. This is just a information receiving opportunity.
I understood.
Well, just to say that these 2 requests you've made before, we talked about them before, so I don't have any questions because I understand absolutely what
I appreciate you remembering that too.
you're asking for, yeah.
Okay.
No, I just want, from county manager's side, want to thank Gary, you and your team for what you do. I really enjoyed the tour. I think it was probably about 3 months ago now. And going through, luckily there was nothing out on the tables when I came through. I understand you took other people through and there's stuff out on the tables. But thank you, because it showed the resilience of your office and how how hardworking folks are and what you're trying to do and how you try to move things forward. So I appreciated that information.
Thank you. And just the other pieces of information is just a year-to-date financials and caseload for this year, going back to 2019 to year-to-date this year, how much has been spent and the number of cases that we've brought in. And then the graph just on cost of autopsies over the year and types of fees that are imposed on those cases.
Anything on the stats you wanted to highlight? You've got a few extra minutes.
On these here?
Yeah.
Or
on your.
No, it's just basically just shows you how the cost has gone up since 2019 in total costs. 2019 total cost for autopsies, about mid-down, was $187,800. And then just follow that line and you can see a progression. Last year was 585, 600,000. And then, like I said, we're on track to do over 600,000 this year. And again, the county will get 40% of that expenditure as far as this 607,000. 40% of that is reimbursed back to the county.
Okay, looking at my board members on the screen, any other items for the coroner?
No, I just want to say thank you for his presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Keeping you on time today.
Yep.
Next team we have up is the sheriff team.
Okay, we have law enforcement and corrections broken into two, so
And I see the sheriff is making his way in. Heidi's also in the audience. Heidi, you want to come and join the table? And I think the sheriff is bringing his leadership team in chair. Sheriff, we're glad you're able to be here with us today.
Yeah, me too.
welcome in, everybody. Sheriff Law Enforcement's up first, and try to keep rough, 20 minutes-ish for each piece of your presentation.
Okay.
Looks like we may have some flexibility there, but.
Yeah, corrections is a little bit shorter than patrol,
Okay.
as usual, but I don't think either one of them is going to be too extensive. A lot of this is grant authority and just change requests. So, and in fact, I'll let Heidi kind of, Chief, if you want to start going over some of the stuff, because some of these you're a little more involved in than me.
Okay, so our list might be a little bit different than yours. We just got the one from Summer this morning. But the first one, and I'm just going to skip through or quickly go through the ones that have revenue associated with them. I think those are pretty easy ones. So we have a contract with Tenino to provide law enforcement services, $25,000. So that's $25,000 in costs and $25,000 in revenue. And those are limited services from certain times in the morning, not full-blown services. And then we have a budget request that doesn't have revenue associated with it for $65,000 for legal fees for arbitration case. I don't know if anybody wants to go into the details of that, or.
That was just the arbitration case that we brought before you guys in the last work session. We did win that arbitration case. So we felt like it was one of those ones that we needed to take all the way. But obviously the legal fees came out to be quite expensive, and normally the prosecutor would represent us in that case, but they didn't have the staffing to do so, so we had to seek outside counsel.
The next one is armored car service rate increase. I think Treasurer Gadman has mentioned that Loomis renegotiated their state contract in June, and so the fees are going up. So this is a request for funding in the current year from June forward, as well as next year.
I'll just comment on that one too. We are trying to make some plans in the future, once we consolidate and get all of our staff into one building, to go away from the armored car transports. We should have enough resources in our office to do those financial transports with like a deputy, instead of using the armored car service, because most of that is just, picking up cash payments and things like that going between the jail. But we should be able to get away from the armored car transport service as well.
And that's a $3,000 item.
Yeah, for 2025. And so also just to tag on to that, when we get a new jail management system, something that I've wanted to do since day one of coming here is actually go to electronic collection out of the jail. A lot of jails have that, and that would help significantly as far as just not having to handle that. And another request is $17,000 to purchase a trailer to haul a utility task vehicle, which we'll talk about in another request down here. This year we received a anonymous donation of $17,000. So the revenue is recorded in the current year, and then we'd like to purchase this utility task vehicle next year. And while I'm on that subject, we have submitted a request for, a grant application to the Nisqually tribe for $30,000, and that's one of our requests for spending authority as well as revenue authority. And that is to actually purchase the utility task vehicle. So the donation to purchase the trailer, and then the grant application from the Nisqually tribe to actually purchase the utility task vehicle. And then we have a request for budget authority for the high-intensity drug trafficking areas grant. This is one that we get through the Narcotics Task Force program, and this is just what we estimate that we'll spend in 2025. So there's revenue associated with that as well. And then budget authority for the Mary Dulciana Halloran Grant Foundation. That is to, and we've already done this purchase. It's $25,000. We've got the money. We just need the revenue and spending authority. We purchased a canine, a camera for the canine to be attached to their
Dash of their harness.
harness. I couldn't think of a jacket. So that has already been purchased. And then budget authority for the organized crime drug enforcement task forces, $5,000. That contract ended 9/30, so that is revenue and budget authority for that contract. Then the Pursuit Technology Grant through the Department of Commerce is $150,000. We have, or we're working on purchasing grapplers and Star Chase units. So that's revenue and expenditure authority. And the last one is for the law enforcement budget is a projected overreach of $70,000. We're still working on projections. I think everyone knows the challenges of TC Connect and getting good data from the system. I was working yesterday on updating projections for actuals, and there's two areas in the system where you can pull expenditures, and I got two different numbers for the same query. I've reported that issue. It's not significantly off. It's about $34,000 off, but the fact that it's off is concerning to me. So for the projections, I'm going to use the higher number to be prudent. But we are, like everyone else, having challenges with that system. So we will continue to work on the projections and refine that number. The other thing that I do want to comment, we purchased 2 canines this year. We have a request in, if we can add a budget request to use the, I think it's roughly $16,000 out of ER&R to pay for those canines. Right now they're charged to our budget, general fund. It would be great if we could use that ER&R funding, but Central Services would need to add that request. So that's, I know there's COLAs also listed on this, and as well as the IT position. I can't really speak to those. I think it's a 2.5% COLA, is that correct? That the numbers, that's not something that we requested. So 2.5%.
3% in accordance with the contracts that were already settled.
And then I know IT has requested an additional position. Sherry Ilg has reached out to me and talked about the need there with the cameras. That's increasing workload for them, so that's $140,000. And I know there's also a request for body-worn cameras, replacing those and going with Axon. And that appears to be public safety tax funding. And I think those are the only ones that we didn't speak to specifically.
We should have a work session coming up to discuss some of the body camera stuff. When we got our quote from Axon, they actually came in way under what we anticipated them. anticipated this big, huge cost to go to Axon. And it was actually much smaller and more reasonable than we thought. So we'll provide more details on that in the upcoming work session.
Heidi, I just want to add a huge thank you, because I know that the sheriff's budget has a lot of different revenue and expenditure components to it. And you've been working very hard in the TC Connect environment to pull that all together. And I know that's created a lot of impact on you personally and your team. So as we get through this, thank you so much for your hard work.
And one of the challenges too, with doing the projections, and I'm trying to see if we can get a number on this. I know financial services is working extremely hard to get expenses, so that's credit card payments, processed and actually charged to offices and departments. We know that there's a lot of still pending, and so we don't see that charged to our budget. And so we're trying to get a handle on how much of that is pending. There's a push to use credit cards because we get a rebate, which is great. But if those payments are sitting there as pending and not charged to our budget, then we're going to get a surprise once they process. And so I've asked my staff this morning, can we look at and see how much is out there that's pending, so that we can add that to the projection as well, so we don't short that. The challenge with that is, I was told this morning that we'd have to go in and look at every single one to get a dollar value from that. So I've asked, can you tell me, is it 10 that's pending, or is it 100 that's pending, that kind of thing. So I'm still trying to get that data. So we do have a few more minutes. Do we want to move into corrections or talk more about
Let's take
that?
questions on these items, if there's any from the board. Commissioner Edwards, I see you're off mute.
Yes, Heidi, you made reference to TC Connect and a $30,000 error. Did you ever figure out the why on that?
It's a difference of numbers. I don't think it's an error necessarily, but one data pull shows 34,000 higher than the other data pull. I can pinpoint where it is and what month it is. So it's salaries in July and August. It is supplies in August, I think it was. It's overtime in August, and professional services in August. And to figure out exactly where, that takes a lot of data digging. I've sent what I found to Darren and asking, and this just happened yesterday, so he has not had time to respond yet, but short of that, I can't tell you why one data poll shows one thing and another data poll shows another thing. So, like I said, for projections, I'm going to use the higher number. I think that's prudent to do so. And
If I may, Commissioner Edwards, there's a lot of departments are in the place of verifying their information, and then we're working with our team that's supporting that function. There's some staff in the auditor's team. Also, there's our vendors here, Cedar. And as they're reporting issues, they're going back around and making sure that when the data was pulled over, that things are accurate and appropriate. And that some of that is part of any data migration. We're just experiencing a lot of it. And so we're making our third-party support aware so they can come back around and fix things as necessary. And I really appreciate the auditor's team, Darren, Diana, who are raising these issues and advancing them forward with our IT department, Sherry, our director, and then Juan, who's our project lead.
I had a question.
Thank you.
On some of your, since you have the Pursuit Technology Grant and whatnot, I'm just curious, how things are going with the new Pursuit law and the technologies. I know you were training on, last I heard. I haven't really heard much about that lately. Has anyone used it? Has it had any benefit so far? Are you still getting it ramped up, or?
Still getting ramped up. So the Star Chase units, the GPS ones, those are installed on the cars. The policy and procedure is done. Those have been deployed. So far, we are 0 for 2 on deployments. One of them was just in heavy, heavy rain. I mean, to the point where, you know, can't even really see on the camera because the windshield wipers are moving so hard. So we anticipated there would be some struggles with that in the rain. But the Star Chase units are out, and those are ready to be, we're keeping track of all the data to figure that out. The grappler, the one with the net, those devices get here this week, and they're getting installed this week by the county shops, and the policy and procedure is already done. So I believe we have like 8 or so Tahoes that are getting outfitted with those this week, and those will be out on the road as well. Those ones are gonna be, I think, a lot more effective in any kind of condition, because there's less technology finicky stuff, and it's just about grabbing the car and stopping it, so.
Are pursuits down, like
No.
overall, or no?
No. We just, I guess I can speak to impaired driving is still a problem. I think over the weekend, we took 5 DUI crashes. We had a couple pursuits for DUI, and yeah, impaired driving is still a big problem. And you know, we had 3 years of letting people drive away in cars and not doing anything. So I anticipate we're probably going to see another 3 years of trying to shift that behavior back the other direction.
Other questions for the sheriff's team before we move to corrections? Okay, we can go with the corrections.
Okay, so corrections, we just have one other than, if there's any COLAs, for that. And that's 54,000, and this is for contractual increases. Our service contracts have a provision in there that allows the vendor, to ask for up to a 3% increase. Costs go up, salaries go up, that kind of thing. And so two of our vendors have asked for a 3% COLA, our medical services vendor, and then our inmate training provider vendor. So that's a total of 54,000 for those two vendors. And that's all the requests that we have. I think there's the COLAs as well.
In the summary sheet we had, it has contractual increases for medical service and inmate training.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then several COLA items.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioners, questions? Okay. That's good enough.
Easy enough.
Have a good day. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys.
Next, we're ready. Our head of schedule is district court. District court, want to go forward? Morning, Frankie.
Put up the slides that you presented. Sorry? What is it, put up the slides that you had presented?
Sure, thank you. Good morning. My name is Frankie Peters. I'm the Court Executive Officer for the Thurston County District Court. I do apologize. Judge Brett Buckley is out of the country right now. And being so, all of our other judges are on docket, working feverishly away through all of our calendars. So it's just me today. The first thing I wanted to go over isn't on the slides. It's regarding the substance monitoring program. That request was put in through this midterm, but I do understand the board has already addressed substance monitoring program through ARPA. We have that covered for next year. That item can be stricken from the midterm requests, as well as any of the projections for the next year. So I do greatly appreciate the board having that consideration of thoughtfulness and continuing that program through to the next year. The first request that we have up is a general fund request. I do understand the difficulties that the board has and the considerations into the general fund budget, especially into the next year, let alone the next couple of years. But due to what we're seeing, we felt that it was imperative to put this request before the board. We are requesting additional probation FTEs. As a background, in late 2022 into 23, we had to go through a process of reducing workload for our supervised probation due to the overwhelming caseloads that we had. At that time, we were only able to supervise those cases that were third-time DUIs or domestic violence charges. In 2023, for last year's biennium, we had requested that we had 2 additional probation FTEs added. Due to the county budget limitations, those requests were denied, and district court was also required to take a budget cut that resulted in the loss of 2 probation positions. As a result of that, here in 2024, in January, we were unable to provide any supervised probation. Where we're at right now is we have 1 staff person that is actively monitoring over 1,800 cases. These are for affirmative conditions, those conditions with a due date imposed by the court. This 1,800 is not over a year. This is at any given point in time. There are 1,800 cases that are actively being monitored. That caseload is not manageable, it's not sustainable. That is the caseload of 4 FTEs that we are requiring 1 staff person to do. When we had talked about probation previously too, we talked about the impacts of losing probation, let alone having reduced staffing for that probation. We talked about the increases in recidivism that we'd be seeing, the increases in non-compliance, as well as the increases in warrants. Recidivism, of course, is something that takes a little bit longer for us to get data points, so for us to report, so I do not have anything on that, but we have been able to keep a close eye on our increases with non-compliance and warrants. Since those reductions, there has been a 75% increase in our non-compliance proceedings. And I wanted to provide this number on the board because 75% means one thing until we actually see the numbers. We went from 4,000 non-compliance proceedings in a single year, and this year we are going to be hitting 7,000 non-compliance hearings for that year. There's also been a 75% increase in warrants issued through those non-compliance stages, and there is a 79% increase in non-compliance where there is active protection orders existing on those cases. As you can imagine, these have direct impacts not only on the courts, but all of our justice partners. When we're talking about warrants, we're talking about law enforcement, we're talking about corrections, facility space, jail space, non-compliance proceedings, we're talking about attorneys. I'm sure that Prosecutor Thunheim, as well as Patrick O'Connor from Public Defense, can attest to the difficulties that their staff has had in this increase in addressing non-compliance. I know that Patrick O'Connor has been in here and spoke to some of these issues, and we have remained engaged in these conversations so that we can find any avenue we can to address these outside of budget. And we're starting to hit a wall with that. We're trying to be progressive, we're trying to be thoughtful. Some of those means are, for instance, our text message reminders. Thurston County was the first court in the state of Washington to implement text message reminders for court dates. We have also been the first to expand those text message services. We've included 5 different options for those, and one of those includes notification of when their affirmative conditions are due to the court, as well as resources and contact information. Essentially, everybody that's been given one of these conditions from the court, they're going to get reminders saying, hey, your condition's going to be coming up, it's due, we haven't received anything 1 month prior to, 2 weeks prior to, 1 week prior to. Even with all these changes that we've made, all these kind of innovative approaches to resolving this issue without FTE, even with that, we're still seeing these massive increases that are just not manageable. We can't address them. The only other way that I can see to address issues that are increasing at this rate outside of probation is we have to start looking to increase law enforcement, increase attorneys, increase prosecutors, increase court staff, judicial officers. The issue here is pretty resounding. So for that reason, we wanted to put this request before the board for consideration. Is there any questions on probation? I know that we have with a little bit of flexibility in time, but I still want to be conscientious of where we're at.
You had, go ahead, Commissioner Edwards.
I guess, when you talk, Frankie, when you talk about, notices to these folks, is that on their own phone, or do we issue them a phone? What's the deal there?
That is on their own phone. For some of our specialized programs or therapeutic programs, we will provide phone services and they can get those, but 99% are through their own phones. And we've had a lot of success in that. When we implemented the text message reminders, we actually saw a 20% decrease in warrants when we did that back in, I believe, 2018, 2019.
Okay, thank you.
You say there's one person monitoring all this, and then I heard you say that really four people in addition to the one, is right? Or I thought you said
Four people total to manage that one, or that one caseload.
Okay, so but you're asking for 4 positions.
Correct. It's not where we need to be. I want to be conscientious of where we are at as a county as far as the funding. We need 7 positions inside probation to be able to do what we need to do. But I do also understand and have been in regular conversation with the county, and I try to keep myself apprised of the information as much as I can, and 7 just isn't feasible, not only from the court perspective, but from the county perspective. So right now I'm looking at mitigating these issues, not only for the court, but our entire justice system as we move through, get a better idea of where the county is at funding-wise, so that we can approach the remaining needed FTEs in the future.
So addition of these 4 plus the one you have would put you at 5, or you actually need 7.
Correct.
Just making sure I understood that. Other commissioner questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Frankie.
Okay. I will move on to the next request. This request was put to the board before, so it shouldn't be unfamiliar, but I will still go through it briefly here. This is a request, this is a non-general fund request to address the compensation for some of our positions within mental health and veterans court, so this will be TST. We had put this request through last biennium to the board. At the time, the TST Advisory Committee had voted in support of this request. Due to the state of where everything was at, I believe with the class comp, the board had requested that these be postponed and presented to the board the following year, so here we are. I did want to make sure that we continued engagement with the TST Advisory Committee, so I've reached out to them and had an opportunity to meet with the entire committee to go over the request again and make sure that they're still in support and they still have the opportunity to look at the funding availability on their end. The TST Advisory Committee had supported, voted and unanimously supported the request to the board this midterm. With that being said, this request is really about ensuring that we can hire and retain the best staff to support these programs. This is a people business. These staff are directly correlated to the success of this program. As we've had transitions over the years, these recent years, you can see the compliance and success of our participants decline as we start losing staff and increase as we have staff that have been with us. And I know that it was either Commissioner Fournier or Commissioner Klaus that ended up coming into one of our dockets where one of the participants actually spoke to this exact issue. The participant had gone through 3 different care coordinators through their 2-year program with us. And through that process, he himself, as well as our program, had noted the issues that ended up happening throughout that process. You have a care coordinator that transitions out, you lose that trust, you lose that rapport, you start seeing non-compliance happen, you have this period of issues that are attempted to be addressed until you can get a new care coordinator on, and then there's this period of time of rebuilding that trust, rebuilding that rapport, getting that person back on track. Every single time that we lose somebody in these positions, it has a direct impact on the success of each of our participants. And with that being said, the compensation right now just is not representative of the roles, responsibilities, and the educational requirements of these positions, even when we go into the class comp and those related positions that are presented in there. I've gone through each of those positions, and you can look at just the experience and the educational requirements for those. And what you'll see from ours is we have requirements for master's degrees, clinical licensures, so that they can perform assessments, certifications through the Department of Health. This isn't just have a GED and a year of experience in administrative support. This is a therapeutic approach to resolving these issues and ensuring success of our participants now and into the future. So this is one that, again, we presented prior to. We want to make sure we get this before the board again, as we are very much in support of this, as well as the TST Advisory Committee.
So looking at the chart, and I'm trying to see what the magnitude of the asks are. It says TST, Mental Health Veterans Court classifications, 52,000 for next year. That's the sum total of what, there's 2 positions you're talking about?
That would actually end up covering 4 positions, our 3 care coordinators and our program
Oh,
manager.
3 care coordinators, okay. Okay, that's good to know. And then the tech, okay. Covered substance use monitoring. Okay, so that's really the 2 big pieces of what you guys are coming forward.
Yep, that's the 2 big pieces. If you want, I can go over the correction quickly, just to explain that.
Go ahead.
I know that I provided a lot of information in the narratives for these requests. For this one specifically, within our contract with Health for TST funding for our Mental Health and Veterans Court, as with any other program, any of those services that are supported by TST are funded through TST. This includes the judge time and the clerk time on those dockets. Within that Mental Health and Veterans Court budget, we don't have a line item for it, and we don't have the ability to absorb it. So I've gone through all of the salaries, every single one of our line items, and the funding just isn't there. So this is to put that funding that's contracted in with public health to support the judge and clerk time. And I do want to share my appreciation for Jennifer. She's been absolutely fantastic. I could not tell you the lengths that she's gone through to work with me through this process. And especially in identifying what you'll see in there is the reduction for our general fund too, which is a great thing to be able to sit here in front of everybody and say. Within the TC Connect, what we're able to do is adjust that distribution so that for these positions specifically, that distribution goes to TST as opposed to general fund. Right now, if you look at these positions, it's 100% general fund funded. So what ends up happening is that approximately $80,000 is allocated by the board for that position, 100%, and then that ends up getting returned back to the county through the variance. As opposed to us doing that every single year, this is $80,000 back to the board for that general fund to be allocated based off of their priorities, so that we can ensure that we're managing that budget appropriately.
All right. Questions from board?
Frankie, thanks so much for the detailed information you provided. Really appreciate having you work in concert with the team to round up the information, respond by the deadline. Your team does a great job. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. And I can't say enough about the county's team. It's been a pleasure to work through them, with them through this last year and ongoing.
I'll see you later, Brent.
Thanks so much, appreciate you.
Appreciate it. All right, we'll plow forward with, I saw the prosecutor, yep, he's here.
Well, let's go.
Good morning, John.
Morning. right, well, good morning. Appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about our budget proposals for midterm. I want to start off with just some very high-level comments. First of all, I know you all know Scott Cushing, who's the Chief Civil Deputy. I'm going to let him speak a little bit to the Civil Division proposals for midterm this year. Christy Peters, who's the Chief of Staff, focusing on the criminal budget, is actually in court this morning. She was set to start a trial this morning that may or may not go, but she had to make a court appearance. And so I'm going to try to cover that as best I can. But she may be able to come in and we can certainly supply additional information if we need to later on. It's kind of a good news, bad news story for us coming into this budget cycle, into the 2025. I am actually very pleased to say that we are making, I feel like, substantial progress in our backlog. I think we're probably close to about halfway through the backlog of felony referrals that existed as we were coming out of COVID. A lot of those cases were cases that were not prosecutable, and so we've done our review on them and ended up declining to file charges, but a number of those also now have been charged and are moving through the system, and we're continuing to work through those. So to me, that is good news, and that's what we've been using a lot of our ARPA positions and resources to try to do, although I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. The other good news is that we are finally almost completely fully staffed, which has not been the case in, I believe, almost 2.5 years that we've been constantly recruiting lawyers, basically since we were coming out of COVID. So I've got a number of new young lawyers. And the nice thing about that for an organization is that there's a lot of new energy, enthusiasm, but a lot of needed training. And so we've been using this year a lot of our salary savings because we've been hiring lawyers at lower salary, less experience than the lawyers we've been losing. So we capture that savings within that year. We've been trying to utilize that to do a little bit of extra training for those new lawyers coming into the criminal division. But for me, again, that was a critical need. I think as we were going into the budget cycle last year, I think I was down 11 lawyers in the office. We were substantially shorthanded, and so we've been very successful in recruiting, and particularly our best strategy for that has been our internship program. We've recruited about, I think, 5 or 6 of our interns coming out of law school to join the office full time. So that's been a big help. Bad news is workload continues to increase. Referrals are up. I'm sure you'll hear the same thing from public defense as well. Their case loads are up because when our cases go up, so do theirs. Fairly substantially. So we're continuing to have to work through the increasing workload that's just coming at us, in addition to trying to do the cleanup on the backlog. In terms of our specific proposals for midterm, we've got a few that are that we've highlighted. The number one is for our the position is called Community Resource Development Specialist, I believe. Yeah, we call her Community Engagement Specialist. Tara Thethlana. I trip sometimes on the first 2 syllables of her name, but for many, many, many years, we have been the lead for the Target Zero program in Thurston County. And that project oversight has fallen on that position for a long time. And for that, we also get some compensation from the state, since that is a state program. We're exploring now the possibility of moving that program to a different place other than the prosecutor's office. And there's some possibilities, but we've seen a kind of an erosion of law enforcement participation in Target Zero. And at the same time, what we've seen is an increasing demand on terrorist time in some of the other projects that we have going, like our innovative justice programs, the diversion things that we're working on, and then the dashboard project, which is fairly substantial right now. So what we're proposing there is that we look at if we're able to move that Target Zero program to a different agency, it also means we're going to lose some of that revenue. And we're looking to replace that revenue with PSST funding, since that would not be, it's technically a grant. I think you'd call it a grant, and so it wouldn't, I think, fall under the supplanting category, because the grant would essentially go away with the program. The next one is our victim advocate program. I think I've talked about this before, so you may remember that in the 2023 session, the state legislature basically ended the victim penalty assessment program at the county level. What they did was they made it optional for judges to impose a victim penalty assessment, but the reality is that penalty assessment's not being imposed in any felony cases anymore. So our revenue from that has dropped off substantially. There was a promise from the state when that bill was passed that they would come in and replace that funding. The problem is the formula they adopted to do that is nowhere near the revenue that we were getting out of the local VPA program. The Prosecutors Association is going to the legislature this session, try to see if we can fix that funding formula problem. But to be proactive, we're also looking at the need of funding a victim advocate, again, moving to public safety sales tax funding as well. A lot of these proposals, is we're looking at that as our funding source. I am on the point right now where if the legislature doesn't come through with any additional funding, and we can't fund anything out of local funding, I'm going to have to lay off at least one and maybe two victim advocates. And I say lay off, I'm actually holding one position vacant right now, just to see how the legislature responds to our request. But it will be a significant hit to our advocacy program. Right now, I think I have 5 advocates for the entire criminal division, and they're handling literally hundreds of cases apiece as they go through the system. We have a request for an investigator. So on a high level, I just want to remind the board that as we were going into the public safety sales tax, that was passed, and we were talking about how each department would utilize it. It's always been my plan to try to take the positions that originally we had some special funding for through the Blake program and through the ARPA program, and roll those into PSST as that funding went away, the ARPA funding and the Blake funding. And part of the ARPA funding involved this idea of us being able to get an investigator, not to replace law enforcement, but we have a significant need to be able to serve subpoenas, locate witnesses, do follow-up that law enforcement doesn't have the capability of doing for us any longer. And by the way, Commissioner Edwards, I think if he's still online, he and I had a conversation a while ago about whether there would be an opportunity to partner with the sheriff's office for something like that. And I did talk to the sheriff at some length about it, who basically said that for the county's purpose, it's actually substantially less money to do an investigator for the prosecutor than it would be to try to add something to the sheriff's office and add all the additional expenses that go along with that, with a full law enforcement commissioned position, and then dedicate that person to the prosecutor's office. So I think we both agreed after looking at that it was a better strategy for us to look at a prosecutor investigator. We had those positions approved as part of ARPA, and our difficulty has been working with HR to get a job description put together on that. Is a source of great frustration for me, quite honestly. But we want to continue to work on that and get that in place.
Can I jump in there, John?
Sure, go ahead.
When you talk about that job description, there's other jurisdictions that have investigators in the prosecutor's office, right?
There are, and we have most of those descriptions. Quite honestly, Commissioner, the tension that exists in this right now is that Human Resources wants to have one job description for both prosecution and defense investigators, even though in my view they are very different in terms of what they do, and we have not been able to resolve that conflict. So that's it's really about whether we can actually create an investigator job description that's specific to the prosecutor's office, which is the way that we would much prefer to do it.
I guess from my perspective, you ought to be in the driver's seat as to what you need. So maybe we need to talk about that a little later.
Yeah, I think that could be a place for an offline conversation about how to move forward with that.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted the board to know that we've been working on this. We're trying to get this put together so that it's ready at the point where we could actually hire somebody into a position like that. The other requests, I think, are all related to that move from ARPA to PSST. But one thing I wanted to say is that in the 2024 budget, so the last budget cycle, one of our ARPA deputy prosecutor positions was eliminated because it was vacant. And I don't know where the lack of communication, where there was a breakdown in communication, but the position was vacant, but we actually had already made a prospective offer to a candidate into that position. And it was one of these where we make offers to law school graduates who are taking the bar, and so the hiring is made conditional on them passing the bar. So we had locked somebody into that position, and then the position was eliminated. Now, fortunately, I had other positions where I could move that person into, but it wasn't vacant by choice. That's what I wanted the board to know. It's not that we had chosen to leave it vacant. It is, in fact, a result of the fact that we were trying to hire and fill all of our positions. So one of our proposals is to restore that position back into ARPA, and then again, if ARPA money starts to, at the end of the ARPA funding, to roll that position into the PSST funding. And then in terms of the criminal need, the final request is for a chief criminal deputy prosecutor. I think that could be either general fund or PSST funded. My chief criminal deputy position was originally left vacant to make a budget cut that was required in 2019, I think it was, because it happened to be vacant, and the choice was hiring a chief criminal and laying off another deputy, or leaving the chief criminal vacant. So I did that, and then ultimately that position was eliminated as part of the 2020 COVID budget cuts. So I'm trying to get that position restored again. I have no chief criminal deputy managing the criminal division. I'm actually kind of doing that myself right now, which is difficult in terms of everything else that I have on my plate. There is a possibility that we would also discuss whether that could be a reclass of an existing deputy prosecutor if I wanted to do an internal promote. So that's a possibility as well. But again, we wanted to put it in the budget request as a placeholder. And then there is a civil request. I'm going to let Scott speak to that.
Thank you, John. So in our civil division, we have, I believe the request is for a legal assistant too. I think that's sort of a limp along position that we need to fill, mostly because our staff is pretty overburdened with the work that they've got. Just there's the general civil side of things that we handle, and then there's the ITA court that we handle, and also the public records requests, or our public records unit. So we have two staff there. One staff, I guess, full-time FTE for ITAs, but that position is funded by, I don't know the name of it, the ASO or something like that. But the burden that it puts on our office there has increased significantly because of the amount of hospitals that are now in operation here in the county. We have court 5 days a week, used to be 2. So it's one of those things where, yes, we are getting funded partially by it, but the time is not allocated elsewhere to help with general civil. So we're sort of struggling there. Public records requests continue to sort of explode, and the burdens that we have on our staff there are pretty heavy. One of the issues is that we have staff that we'd like to cross-train, but are unable to do so because they're so overburdened with the public records work that they have currently that they're not able to do so really. So I believe this kind of would catch us up at least, or at least give us some relief in certain areas. And yeah, I think I don't think it's a big ask, but it's one of those things that I think would help us quite a bit.
I will just follow up and say the ITA caseload, it's going to be something that's going to need to be on the radar going into the future. That's been a huge increase in the workload on the civil division as the Involuntary Treatment Act cases. And it seems like it's continuing to grow even more. So that's just I think a look into the future.
Is the civil pieces up there on that chart?
I don't know if it's that chart. I know I saw it in the documents that Heidi prepared for us.
That's the
Administrative assistant?
No, it's not that one.
It's the one that says they add the second investigator, FTE, that's the legal assistant.
oh, I see.
Okay. Oh,
We had some technical difficulties with the system.
okay.
Oh, okay, all right.
But the dollar amounts are all.
The dollar amount is correct.
Okay, thank you.
We'll have that corrected, sorry.
Okay, yeah, I was getting a little confused on that one.
I didn't find it either when I was looking up.
So when you say, yeah, because when you're talking about the HR piece, so you don't have the investigator position, going back to the criminal, you don't have the investigator position, you are asking for it.
Right, we had approval to move forward with it as part of the ARPA program.
Okay.
And that was first put online, but we could never get the position description nailed down, so the FTEs were actually never created.
Okay.
Yeah, and then in the last budget, I think those were, either the funding for that was either eliminated or something happened so that we weren't moving forward with those anymore.
And Scott, what was up there it says second investigator, but what are you calling the position that you're asking for?
I believe it's legal assistant too.
And that's to assist with what you described as the increased public records and ITA caseloads in your.
Yes, and then general civil as well. I have more requests, but not formally, not yet.
Chair, regarding the ARPA positions, I know that there's something organizationally we are tracking. Robin, you want to speak to that?
Sure. So we've just recently received the new federal rules about obligation of positions. And they state that if it's a county position, that the positions must be filled as of December 31st of this year, or they can't continue on ARPA in the future. So if you're having a challenge with that, we need to address it really fast, or we lose the ability to charge it to ARPA.
I think all of our current ARPA positions are filled, and the ones that were authorized under ARPA are filled. And then the one that was eliminated, I mean, we've been in a constant hiring process, so that could be filled very quickly.
Make sure that.
Yeah. That was the way that we were kind of already thinking about it, is to make sure there was somebody in those positions so that the funds were obligated. as that
Right, it
term is.
obligates
Yep.
them, and then we can, the board is already authorized through the end of 25.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's it for me.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes, sir. Just a couple of questions here, John.
Uh-huh.
On your ITA issue, are you aware that Maple Lane, the state is adding 60 beds down to Maple Lane?
I can address that.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I am aware, Commissioner, that would be an issue for the courts and for the clerk and for public defense. That is not an issue for us because the Washington State Attorney General's office handles those cases.
Oh, okay.
The funding overall for that would probably need to increase, but I don't think it would include us.
Okay. And on the funding mechanism to add a chief criminal deputy prosecuting attorney, that's over under other funds. And I'm just wondering why that would be under other funds or what those funds might be.
Do you care to speak to that?
That could be PSST, I think, is what we were looking at proposing, if it was a new FTE, to actually create it under public safety sales tax funding.
Okay. And then my last question is, the sheriff made a comment this morning in his presentation that, you know, the whole DWI thing doesn't seem to be getting any better. So do we have any some way you can quantify any successes on target zero?
I'm sure that we have some metrics, and I'd be happy to have Tara share that with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it for me. Thank you very much.
I have a question maybe for Robin or Summer. The prosecutors identified some needs and identified public safety sales tax. When we just had our sheriff thing, we didn't really go through, I mean, I don't remember the schedule for phase-in, but there's going to be positions created for public safety sales tax funding. Is there a reason why we didn't talk about those?
Well, on the sheriff's, oh, I want to speak for them.
I mean, I don't know who's the best person to.
Yeah, on the sheriff's presentation, there is other funding sources as well on there. Some are, I don't know, or can you speak directly to that?
The phase-in requests for the sheriff's office were approved in the biennial budget, so they're not coming forward with any further.
Okay, these are just because, right, we're in the middle of, okay, so
Correct.
that's all been squared away.
Correct.
Essentially, okay. All right, well, that helps me.
And I think they're actually adding positions. We're looking at, rolling ARPA positions to that when the ARPA funding goes out. So that may not even occur. It sounds like it may not even occur within this budget. I just am trying to make sure that everybody is clear what our plan is for that funding. Yeah.
And those,
On the radar.
so it's just for a petition, a ARPA position, generic prosecuting attorney ARPA position, that funding lasts through end of 2025?
Board has approved that through the end of 25.
So assuming that position's appropriate, which it should be, filled by 12/31, which it will be, or is, then we really wouldn't need to address it in this budget, midterm budget. But I get what you're saying.
I think that's true.
Heads up that this is where we need
Yeah.
to be.
The one that might need a more urgent look is Blake, because I don't know what the latest deadline is on Blake, but I know that we don't know what the legislature's gonna do in this session with that.
So so far, the Blake contract with the administrative court has been extended each year in accordance with the state fiscal year. So Currently, it's through the end of June 2025. And the last conversation I had with the financial officer at the administrator of the court was he anticipates it to just keep pushing out as long as there's money, and no counties have come anywhere close to spending the money.
So hopefully, that funding continues as well, and we wouldn't need PSST for that as quickly as we might have thought. Yeah. And I just, you know, we're at a point now where really every lawyer in the criminal division is carrying a caseload. And in fact, as you know, I've had to roll up my sleeves and do some trial work this year. Christy's doing trial work this year. So we are really kind of at minimum staffing just in terms of doing the workload right now. But I know midterms was a time that was not intended to be, you know, the big policy requests. But I do think next year we'll have some policy requests, particularly if the Supreme Court starts to take any action on the public defense caseload standards.
Okay, any other questions for the prosecuting team? Seeing none?
Thank you, John, so
Okay,
much for your
thank
hard
you.
work.
Appreciate it.
No questions, thank you.
I'm gonna suggest that we take a break and maybe pick up with the clerk at 10:30. Okay? Okay. All right, we'll be in recess until 10:30. Okay? Okay, it's 10:31 a.m. We are back for our work session here on October 7th. We're picking up with the clerk's office. Linda Enlow, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Board. My name is Linda Meyer-Enlow, and I'm here to talk about my request to add back into my budget two counter FTEs that were reduced last year during the budget cycle. These two staff manage all of the incoming public requests, be it filings, new cases, documents, payments, phone calls. As a result, I chose to shut off our phones because I do not have the staff to answer the phones, but I gave the public an option to email us. The emails are unreal. It is more than my management staff, my executive assistant can handle. I spend nights, weekends, answering emails, and it's overwhelming. The number of needs that are out there, I feel like I am not providing the service to the public, which is required of my office by statute. I'm causing a heartache to Superior Court because they get a lot of phone calls and thus have to either forward to my management team because there's no staff to send those calls to. I'm I'm struggling with hiring court clerks. The pay is so inadequate. The people that I do hire recently declined my offer at the highest end of the scale because she would have taken a $20,000 a year cut in pay. I don't know how we'll keep going at this rate. So I would entertain any questions that you might have specific to what I've stated.
Commissioners? No?
No questions?
Well, Commissioner Fournier, go ahead.
You're asking for additional positions. I also saw that there's, I think, like 6 vacant positions that aren't posted. So like my understanding is we've got several positions that are authorized for you to hire, but they're not, I don't see them anywhere posted to hire them. So it's hard to hire people when it's not being advertised. Are you asking that the vacant positions be eliminated and we transfer funds to these positions that you're asking for, or are you intending to try and hire for the positions that you're already authorized and aren't filled? Or what exactly are you asking for?
So most of those positions are the proceeding specialist, which is a court clerk position. We do have one position that we're in the process of reclassifying to an office coordinator position. That's been ongoing for, at least 6 to 9 months, and it takes a lot of time to get through a reclass of that. That's 4. What other ones?
We have a Blake position that's open. We're not going to fill that because we don't have enough Blake work anymore. So we just have our old Blake person. She's in a new position, so she does it when we have work coming in, which isn't enough to fill a full position. Another one's a county position that we're asking to get that reclassified.
That's the reclass,
to
yes.
a coordinator position to help out the managers. We have another, if I remember right, it's the backlog position, the core backlog position. We have no way of tracking what we're supposed to track to be able to get
That's for the
refunded
COVID.
So we can't fill that position because we won't be able to track what's needed to track on that. So those 3 positions, those ones, and then we just had one position open up, and then I don't know about the other.
So Steve's, the recent retirement last week,
Yeah.
I don't believe is posted yet.
I just I can appreciate the
I hate to
request.
interrupt, but
Oh, sorry.
I don't know if anybody can hear me, but I can't hear anything on your end.
Uh-oh.
You can't hear us, Commissioner Edwards? Not hearing me? Okay,
I was just wanting to comment on the response to my question. I can understand your request, and I've heard some, comments and concerns from other places within the court for the lack or the inability to answer phone calls. But it's you really, my question and then your response, it just kind of, to me, it elaborates how confusing it is looking at the structure and the needs of the clerk's office. Just in the responses that we just got back, all it did was confuse me even more. You know what I'm saying?
What could I state to clarify for you?
I don't know. Maybe I did reach out to set up a meeting again earlier this week, and I'd like to do that because I do want to understand your needs a little better and kind of where you're at, and just so I guess I'll try and set something up offline with you.
Okay. I do want to add, I've really evaluated the work that counter staff does, and we do have one discretionary service, and that is providing bench copies to the court. And that would take a hit of at least Brian's estimating around $65,000 a year for a service that I do not want to give that up. It's a good service to the public. But that is discretionary. I think I'm the only clerk in the state that provides that service.
I'm sorry, what was the service?
Providing bench copies. So when they e-file their documents.
Okay, yeah, no, I got you. I heard coffee, not copies. I was like,
copies,
coffee?
Sorry.
All right, I knew that I misheard that. Okay, okay, Commissioner Edwards hopefully will come back and get his connection reestablished. But in the meantime, obviously we know these positions because you had them and they're gone. So I don't have any questions about those two. And you and I have talked about how important those are to your basic service.
Oh, okay. I checked out, zoomed back in. I'm on again now.
Can you hear me, Commissioner Edwards?
Yes, now I can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. We're just wrapping up. Did you have questions for the auditor? I'm sorry, the clerk.
For the clerk.
Yes.
No, I really don't. Thank you.
Okay.
I want to add one thing because we've lost a lot of employees to the state. And most recently, this last year, we lost 4 employees who went to Superior Court. One to the state, one to King County Superior Court. And it's due to low pay. So I don't see that changing unless the inequity in pay is addressed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Next up, we have the auditors team.
And I believe we have Joe representing the auditor. I don't know if Diana was going to join yet.
Yeah, they're planning to.
Okay.
If they need a minute, I know where it heads, so we can just.
Yeah, I think they were planning on being down here in a couple of minutes, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Do that time.
Come up and join you.
Mr. Minzer, Joe stepped out to see if he can grab.
Yeah, no problem. We're ahead of schedule. Want to get the right people here.
Should we stop the live stream?
You want us to stop the live stream? You have it muted right now.
That's fine.
Belated happy birthday.
How are you, Steven?
Tell me we're on break. Tell me we're on break.
Untimely question. So, Kenny, everything you hoped, Ty?
It was pretty good. It was better than the show I saw in Portland a few years ago. It was just cool, like, and they went to Evergreen and, you know, they're like shouting out to all these Olympia stuff and just like, I wouldn't have gone in Seattle, but I was like, Capitol Theater, yeah.
$1,000 for us was posted.
With my late night IT lesson.
Yes. Was it everything?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
For you guys, if you're ready to go.
so Diana was going to come down and share a presentation.
Yep, she's here.
Okay,
Joe and Diana are here and they're working on the slides. Looks like they got it.
Okay.
Can you see the slides?
No, I'm seeing auditor, it looks like they're your slides.
We'll try to fix that.
1 second.
Can you see it now?
Yes, I can.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, I will, hang on 1 second. All right. Well, thank you. So does this mean I get more time then?
If you need a little more time, you can have it, Mary.
Okay, thank you.
We're a little bit ahead.
Okay, so just a little bit about the auditor's office. You know, the auditor's office in large part is self-funded. For example, 25% of my own salary as well as Diana's salary is funded through election reimbursements during the election. And local jurisdictions have been reimbursing us for their election costs for decades. But the big revenue increase recently is that because of my efforts through legislation, we finally got the state to begin sharing their share of election costs. And that's a battle that counties had been fighting for over 30 years. When I was elected, it was sitting on the shelf, and I was determined, that was something that always bothered me. I was determined we were going to pull it off the shelf, dust it off, reintroduce it. And I worked really hard on this bill. And we got it passed in 2020. The other thing is we also bill all the cities for maintaining their voter registration rolls. So all of our voter registration expenses also get billed out to cities throughout the county. We also bring in revenue from passports. And as you know, I go after grants aggressively. So even with the additional positions that you've talked about, and you've funded since 2020, we've been able to turn over even more revenue to the general fund. Next slide. So we will continue to support the clerk in 2025. We didn't know that we would be able to do that. We were going to install some new recording software, but frankly, we do not have capacity for a system implementation right now. So we're going to put that off. We're also projecting increased revenue for 2025. And one of the things that our revenue forecast that we turned into doesn't include was a huge batch that our South County subagent just completed, which was for U-Haul, which that transaction alone brings in $60,000 to the county. And this is ongoing revenue. They landed this account, and it's been very advantageous for them as well as us. So the projections for reporting were also developed before the interest rate drops. So as you know, interest rates dropped 50 basis points. So we're seeing early indications that this is having a positive impact on the housing market. And then, of course, we brought in a tremendous amount of grant funding in 2024. So while recording activity is still historically down, we're starting to see early signs of a recovery. Our September numbers are up for month over month. So if you look at September of this month and what September of last month was, that's significant. So Di, are we on slide 3?
We are still on license and recording revenue. You have passports and the change requests left. I'll go wherever you'd like me. You want to go to the next one?
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Your photo is frozen, so
Well, I'll just briefly, I mean, that's up. I mean, we've made more revenue this year than all of 2023, and that's going to continue to see that increase. So our change request that we put in for increasing revenue in 2025 was $51,000. Next slide. So, as I mentioned, we're bringing in, since 2022, $543,000 additional revenue from the legislation that was passed, as well as passports. So we did add 2 positions since 2022. So that was an extra $160,000 of payroll costs, which amounts to $110,000 plus COLAs and benefits. So that's an additional $50,000. However, we've also added $383,000 to the general fund since those positions have been added. And this is just in licensing and reporting. So if we have to go through a cut, the only service that I am not mandated by law to provide is passports. So if we have to cut licensing positions, it's going to cost a lot because, it's going to cost more than it would save. And the other thing that's important to note is we also have a bill that we're going to be running next year for a slight increase in the amount of licensing revenue that the county gets to keep, because that seldom goes up. So we'll see how that goes, but hopefully we're successful in that effort also. But keep in mind that Thurston County is the only full-time passport service office in the county at this point in time. So moving on to elections, we did add a change request
Auditor,
for 128,000 additional revenue. Yes.
no, I was just gonna say that your connection was coming in and out a little bit.
But
You might want to decide to turn off your camera because it's probably eating up the bandwidth, and then we can just hear you verbally because your audio and
okay,
video is starting to pause. It's buffering.
let me try that if I can do that.
Sometimes that helps.
Because you can't see me anyway, right?
we could see you, but, and we.
But just a little corner. Yeah, this is fine.
Yeah, it was freezing up. So this sounds
Do you
great.
want me to backtrack?
No, I think we heard
Okay.
everything so
You
far.
heard everything so far, but as you started the elections
Okay.
piece, it was.
Okay, great. So typically in February elections following a presidential election year, we don't have special elections because the validation requirements are just simply so high because of the huge turnout we have in presidential elections. This year may be different. Yelm actually failed 2 levies in a row last year. So they are going to call for a special election. So that would change. We would put in a change request for $128,000 in additional revenue. It would cost us a little bit, about $30,800. If we don't do this election, then we won't have any costs and we won't spend the money. So this will depend on, the BPC construction. We share this district with Pierce County. Occasionally we'll take their part of an election, they'll take ours. Yelm is never really big on that idea because Pierce County election costs are a little higher because of the method that they use. So, we'll see what happens. We think that we can use that large area in our new voter services building to actually conduct that election. We'll just bring out our manual hand scanners that we used before automation. And the other thing that's important to note with elections, the state used to only reimburse us in odd years. So when we conducted even year elections, they did not pay for the candidates or that they had on the ballot or the measures. So we would absorb about $1 million every single year of state costs. So I don't think any of you were here back then, but our budget used to be painful in even years, which is why we put in Fund 1610, which is our election stabilization fund. So now we add to that every year, so we don't have the huge budget requests in even years like we did in the past. But, you know, brings in quite a bit of money into the general fund. And again, this was through a tremendous amount of hard work on this legislation that took several years, and, you know, turning the right people at the right time to get this bill passed. And in 2024, we are going to see $1.2 million in additional revenue that historically the county would have had to absorb. So I think that's pretty important. So moving on to financial services. Are you hearing me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I just got your internet connection is shaky. So, you know, in financial services, we did add 2 FTEs over the last 10 years. We added a grants manager as well as a senior management analyst. But the grants manager has more than paid for themselves, and they've assisted other departments. And just last year, we brought in over $539,000 of grant money to pay for the security upgrades at our new voter services center. So this was a combination of grants from Department of Justice, Secretary of State, Department of Homeland Security, as well as the Accessible Community Advisory Council. So the other thing that has really hit us in financial services is we have had 5 key staff retirements since the pandemic. So that's more than 110 years of county institutional knowledge walking out the door. We lost Cheryl Rochelle, our payroll. We lost Julia, who managed our financial system when we had Munis and did all of the training. She installed all of the upgrades and did all the testing. We lost our small department accounting and credit card administrator, if you remember Maggie, as well as our accounts payable lead. So that was a hit. And then, of course, with Kathy's retirement, she handled public records, all of the financial reporting, all of the CFA schedules and notes to the financial report. And then in July, we lost our operations supervisor. He supervised payroll, accounts payable, and small department accounting. So we did just get acceptance on that position, and that person will start in November. So we've lost a lot of institutional knowledge in financial services, and you know, people who can pull things out of a hat and don't have to do any research are priceless. But we've got a fantastic team, and but they really do need help. So I want to talk about the general fund positions that are paid by ongoing revenue. So in 2021, we did hire a cybersecurity administrator, but the impact of the general fund is only $22,000. We bill this out to elections and also to the reporting M&O fund, which is a restricted fund. Excuse me. We also added that position that was Kathy's, that was project. She took the project position as a senior management analyst. But again, that's got a $32,000 general fund impact because we bill that out to other funds and with the cost plan. In 2022, we added an election specialist. This was actually a restored position. When I first took office, we were experiencing budget cuts, so I cut an election position. So this is really a net general fund impact because we bill this out as an election cost. And then in licensing recording, the specialist that we added is about 110,000 general fund impact. But, you know, again, we're bringing in a lot more revenue, which totally offsets those expenses. You had us down for adding 6 positions, which was in error. So the financial, the senior financial analyst was not a new position. It was simply a reclassification. So cost plan, $44,000 was the total. So only $18,000 really hits the general fund. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the revenue we have brought in versus the cost of the new positions that we have added over the years. So our new positions cost, let's say, rounded up to $600,000, but due to licensing legislation that increased the auditor fee, we had recording legislation that increased the auditor fee. We had the passport revenue because it was cut in 2009. She didn't want to take that on, so we decided to take that on. So that brings in revenue and more than pays for the licensing and recording folks. And then, of course, the big one is the additional election revenue that we recognize now in even years. So the first time we received that revenue was in 2022, and then we'll see, as I mentioned earlier, $1.2 million in 2024. So looking ahead at staffing, there's a huge increase in demands and added complexity in really every single thing we do. I mean, elections is much harder to plan for. You've got so many moving things that you have to take into account that we never did before. And, you know, one of the things that's been really clear to me is, I mean, removing that second chief deputy, so I don't have anything in admin, that's something that we need to reverse. I'm not going to ask for that position this year because of the situation that we are in, but I can assure you every single thing we do has become more complex. The chief deputy used to be over financial services, and we still had Darren as our financial services manager. But Gary Alexander, when he was appointed the auditor position, that was his position. He was the chief deputy of finance. So he cut that position in a budget cut. So, you know, now we're starting to think about how we get more leadership capacity in our office because we are simply overstretched. And it's become blatantly clear as we're trying to face a presidential election and implement TC Connect at the same time. Every single vacation I had scheduled this year, I worked through. So, and Diana has as well. So we need some relief there. But our FTE request for this year is really in financial services. You know, TC Connect has really changed the work landscape in the auditor's office as well as the county. And in the past, financial services, as you know, I mean, we assist other departments in offices. So that's what we do. We train people, we answer their questions. There are a lot of new financial staff that come on, and we train them in county systems, and we simply need more capacity. So this job has become so much bigger than TC Connect. I mean, the position will benefit the entire county. Public Works, my goodness, you know, Karen Weiss, we didn't have the resources to really take on the lead of PPM. which is the project and grants module. So Karen Weiss agreed to take that on, and we need to take that back because she is overwhelmed also, and I don't want to lose her. She is a tremendous asset to this county. But, you know, it will definitely improve internal controls. We've received a lot of audit findings. In the past, we used to have our feelers out more of when somebody might be struggling or when they might be doing something that didn't fit with, you know, generally accepted accounting principles. And we have not had the resources to do this. It will support our budget efforts. And we need this person, we need a person that can help create financial reports out of TC Connect. And we don't create those just for our office. I mean, they're created for every office in the county and department in the county, so they can get the financial data that they need out of TC Connect. So all the departments are going to see better support for projects and grants, staff training, reports. And the other thing that we just learned recently is Oracle requires a quarterly upgrade. So every single quarter, we are going to be testing for these mandatory updates. And while you think an upgrade isn't a big deal, but when you've added custom modifications to a software product, you have a lot higher risk that things are going to break. This Oracle upgrade, it could break this or this or this in what Sierra Cedar has done. So we are going to have to do robust testing every single quarter to make sure the data is coming over correct. We're going to need to validate all the data in our financial system, from payroll to reporting, basically everything. So anyway, it's going to be a lot. And you know, the only thing we haven't changed, since I've been in office, I've helped every single department with their growth, and we have certainly had a lot in Thurston County, and that's not going to stop. So what we haven't changed is the position my immediate predecessor eliminated. So anyway, that was a lot of information. Thank you for listening. I don't know if I have more time but anyway, I would be happy to answer any questions, but I really thank you for your time and your consideration of our one policy level change request. I work really hard to bring revenue and fiscal responsibility to this county. And, you know, I really appreciate your trust in me and my office. And I want to give a special shout out to project managers that worked on our voter services. Tony and Rick did a fantastic job. I really look forward to working with them on the BPC. And I'm going to continue to work hard to bring in grant money for additional upgrades to security at the ballot processing center, and also see if I can't find any cybersecurity grants that are, you know, for elections that I might not be able to pass on to IT, because I know they've put in a lot of great safeguards for this county, but the ongoing maintenance is very expensive as well. So I'm going to try to find some grant money to help them out as well. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Edwards.
Yes, Mary, you made mention that you weren't going to ask for something because of the situation that we are in. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Sure, I briefly spoke to it. If you can quit sharing the slides, I'll turn back on my video. So historically, I mean, with Sam Reed, with Kim Wyman, there were always two chief deputies in the auditor's position, in the auditor's office, and that was cut when Gary Alexander was appointed to this position in 2012. I think it was a 2013 budget cut, which was the year I was elected. So I'm the first auditor that hasn't had two chief deputies. Now I know, you know, there was a time when we almost lost Darren and we increased his salary to that level of chief deputy, but he was doing, I mean, he was the finance manager when they had two chief deputies. So his role hasn't changed, just the salary has. which I think he absolutely deserves that, if not more. So.
I guess the situation we're in, I guess, is because we have this conflict between how much revenue there is, or because we have a lack of revenue. Why wouldn't you ask for it?
Well, because number one, TC Connect got frozen prematurely. So it was impossible at one point in time, and the deadline passed to put anything in as a new budget request. So that was one of the reasons. The second is the forecast that we saw. I mean, that didn't look, I'm a team player, and I know it's going to be tight for everybody. If you wanted to put in that position, I would be eternally grateful. But that's why I didn't put it in, Gary.
Okay. You did make mention about you've got a lot of audit findings somewhere. I didn't really pick up on that. I mean, I knew we had audit findings from the state auditor this year.
Yeah, that's what
you were referring to.
That's what I'm talking about. And we went 6 years with not a single audit finding, but I can assure you, my staff went in and as well as the internal auditor, and provided support to correct the things that were off, that we discovered were off before the auditors came in. We don't have the capacity to do that. And, the ones I don't know that we could have avoided some of them had, we been involved in the process, but we don't have the same level of capacity that we have to hold hands with the complicated transactions of the county like we did in the past. And, we have a tremendous depth of experience in, what's allowable, what's not. So.
Okay, thank you.
We hope to bring that back.
Okay.
Any other questions for the auditor? It's like, no, thank you.
None from me at this time, thank you.
Thank you for your patience and technology.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you, Mary.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
We'll switch over to the treasurer. Behind me, yes, here.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Good. So I got an email from Summer. Said you guys all got this sheet. This is going to be really, really boring. Okay. Really, my budget outlook is okay for next year, based on what commissioners determined last year for my budget capacity. We're gonna have COLAs and that sort of thing, but it looks like they're getting accounted for. The ringer that I've got every year for the past 4 years is the postal rates. We know they're gonna increase them twice a year from now on. The question is, we don't know how much. So at this point, I think I'm gonna be okay, but depending on the actions of other agencies, I may end up needing to come in for a budget amendment, but so far, fingers crossed, I've been able to avoid that. So 7.5 years, I've never asked for one. We did get a surprise this year. I mentioned to you the last time we were together that our Loomis armored carrier almost doubled their rates. And that doesn't affect just me. It affects Public Works. It affects the district court, sheriff. But we are actively shopping for another service, but they're not as plentiful as you might think. Otherwise, I think I'm in good shape for next year. I do have some changes with a couple of significant retirements next year, but I also think I'm in good shape on that as well, so.
Questions for the treasurer? Short and sweet.
I told you it was gonna be boring.
Okay,
much, Jeff.
thank you.
Thank you.
And that gives us time, we're going to the assessor now, is that correct?
That's correct.
Sliding our assessor. Morning.
Good late morning to you. Well, let's see. First, we did not submit policy level requests for this midterm budget. But that should not be an indication that we don't have needs. We just did not see where there was any potential. And rather than take time in our office, which we don't have, time with budget staff, with everything that's been circling around ERP, we did not submit any requests. But I wanted to speak to you just to emphasize that we requested 3 FTEs at the beginning of the biennium. We still need those. We had 2 FTEs cut. We need those. We're down 5 FTEs below what we need. And while I'm talking about FTEs, you were given a handout last week that showed FTE changes since 2010 or something like that. It showed us as adding an FTE that's funded by general fund. Well, we did add an FTE that was funded by general fund, but we lost 2 FTEs that were funded by general fund. As did the prosecutor. I asked him that question after his testimony. So I would encourage you to request a corrected chart that puts staff growth in really a complete, gives a complete picture that has integrity. It shows the positions added and the positions subtracted. Our position that we added was not due to COVID. Our position that was added was due to the last time that the senior exemption was updated and we had a wave of work just as we've had this year without additional FTEs. But that's the reality. We're -1 during the time frame that was analyzed. The status of our office, well, we got done this year. It was 3 months late, but still in time to not impact the budgetary calendars throughout the county. Our ratios are very good, so we waited until we got it right. It was a very tough year. My staff are burning out. I've lost 2 FTEs, a certified general appraiser who liked working in our office, but he's gone back to the private sector. And we lost a cartographer to another county. The whole time she was driving from 5 minutes from another county auditor, assessor's office. But the pressure is growing because the backlogs are growing because we don't have adequate staff. The burnout and the desire to go find another place to work is a byproduct of seeing the way things are now and knowing that we have very senior retirements coming, and knowing that the efficiency that we have with senior employees is something that we're going to lose as they retire. So we're in a very tenuous situation, and we'll be in this situation a year from now when we're talking about the next biennium budget. So I wanted to come and talk to you because I don't want to give the impression that we don't need these FTEs, that we're not struggling every day to get work done without enough FTEs. I watched the auditor's presentation, wonderful presentation, all this revenue attached to FTEs. That's one way. It's very legitimate in her presentation for her to tee it up that way. But it's only one way to measure FTEs and the importance of the FTE. The assessor and treasurer together, without us, you wouldn't have property tax. It's half of your revenue. But can I tell you, put a dollar value on what you'll lose in revenue when we lose an FTE? I cannot. This requires some, trigonometry on your part. You need to get away, respectfully, away from the priority lens of not cutting FTEs that produce revenue or only cutting general fund budget. Look, in my office, we've proposed a reorganization. When I was first elected, I did a reorganization, and the situation was somewhat similar to today, sadly. The office was 3 months late. I eliminated half of the management and restored all the part-time positions to full-time, and did so without a budget impact. So that kind of efficiency is what we've sought in the assessor's office, budget after budget after budget. I've done that major reorganization and 2 minor reorganizations over the years. And this year I'm proposing another reorganization that's revenue neutral, that allows us to do as much as we can with the inadequate resources that we have moving forward. The prospect of further budget cuts. Well, let's talk about that. So far, we've been able to get revaluation done in time to not affect budgets throughout the county. That will continue to be the highest priority when we don't have adequate staffing. But there just aren't other places to cut other than to cut cartographers, which will delay construction projects. More to the point, delay the ability to tax new projects until they've been given a tax lot ID. And they can't get that until the cartography's done, and we're backlogged, we're paying overtime, we're burning people out. We need more staff. When I look at the county's budgetary discussion over the last couple of days, it just sounds like the discussion a year ago and 2 years before that, and then every year before that, before we went to a biennium budget. I don't think it's waste in government. It surely isn't waste in my office. I think that costs are increasing and our revenue is not increasing. And I really think it's time to look at a levy lid increase. And I've done some math on that, and I recommend that you seek the data, and as you're looking at options, that you look at this option. A levy lid increase in Thurston County of 10 cents per thousand would generate $6.4 million, 6.3 million if you exclude all seniors who have a household income of 59,000 or less. And so it would generate over $6 million. Our levy rate, average levy rate for the county is at its lowest point. MSRP runs that chart back to 2002. It's at the lowest point since 2002. If you added 10 cents to that, it would still be at the lowest point since 2002. So we have capacity for that. It's not an easy choice. But breaking general government, and it's not just boring offices like mine, it's answering with not enough resources for social services and all of those needs that you fund, that I want you to fund. It's stability. And I don't think we're ever going to have stability if we don't generate some additional revenue. We've been starved all this time. We've done lean exercises. Some of us have cut management and focused all of our resources on the frontline personnel. That's already happened. There's not more juice to get out of that lemon. So I implore you to take a serious look at a modest permanent levy lid increase. And then to ask for a chart that reflects that into the future. See what that looks like. I can't believe y'all run for reelection. I mean, every cycle, we're in the same gut-wrenching process. And I feel for you, but it's because we can't solve the problem of growing costs when our revenue doesn't grow. And it's just time for that, respectfully. My data's good, by the way. $6,326,445. That's what 10 cents would generate if you exclude seniors who qualify. Not an easy choice, but the voters can make that decision. Think of the city of Olympia and how they approached it in their budgetary process. They proposed an either-or budget and then ran a measure, and it passed, and they did what they said they would do with that money. A couple counties have done this, where it was a general revenue generated. These are on MRSC. One is Whitman County, 2014. Another is San Juan County, 2019. Both of these were general levy lid lifts to restore and enhance funding for general fund expenses and services, one said. The other said,
Did they pass?
they both passed. This proposition would provide stability for 12 county services subject to exceptions based upon fiscal health and changes in grants by canceling the existing lead lift for 2020 and replacing it with an amount 22 cents for a total levy of 85 cents per thousand. So both of those were addressing general fund. So they're good examples. They both passed. Most of the counties larger than us have done at least one for one thing or another. You know, King County gets rather famous for what their voters support, and they support a lot. But I would just point at our county. We ran a criminal justice measure. They always do better, but 70%, you know, was an amazing result. And this takes a simple majority. I think that so many of our citizens are feeling the stresses in society that we can't fully address and stably address. And it's easy for me. I don't have the authority you do. So I respectfully say that the solution is a levy lid lift. So thank you for listening. Appreciate your time.
Questions for the assessor? Commissioner Edwards?
Hi. Yes, when you talk about a levy lid lift, is that the supermajority that it takes, or did I hear you say something about simple majority?
Simple majority, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
You said 70%. What were you referring to?
Well, what the result of the recent one that we ran for law and justice.
It's like
Public,
55.
it was the public safety sales.
Yeah, we didn't get 70%.
You didn't get 70. Well, you got well over what you needed.
We got over 50, but it was 56 or 55, I think. I mean, that's for a tax measure, that's a pretty good margin, but.
It is good margin. Excuse me for thinking it was better.
Yeah.
I thought it was.
I think the point is well taken, so thank you.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have 28 minutes, and we have the Commissioner's Office items, and which team represents those?
Commissioners, as the budget team is making their way over, there is an item, the transfer FTE from central services to commissioners. We're actually going to withdraw that. The team needs to do some more evaluation on that item. So which one? It's the 458, the middle one, 58,000. That one would be withdrawn. And so when we look at the other general fund requests, pretty self-explanatory, as well as the other funds, but the budget team is here to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay,
It's a high-level review. We have the Historic Preservation Fund, TCOM, shift to unspent ARPA funding, the COLA for the union represented staff, conservation futures, extend end date of the ARPA FTE, the COLA for non-union represented staff, and reduction of retirement percentage.
so with that one item removed and the COLA as a placeholder, we don't really have any general fund impacted, is what you're saying. So I guess I'll just throw a question out there. Conservation futures, that's $5 million. What is the nature of that?
That's a placeholder for CPED to have the capacity to do land purchases without coming to the board for amendment changes and potentially losing that window of opportunity.
CP land purchases, okay. Any other Commissioner Edwards, go ahead.
Do we have anything new to add to some of the discussions that we've had with the discrepancy between the auditor's assessment of the situation and the county staff's assessment here? Any changes, or can you clarify any of the why the big difference? And we've got a history that we can refer back to. So I don't know if others have any questions about that or not. It always stumps me why we have the differences.
Yeah, Commissioner Edwards, on Friday, the budget team and I sent out a document. We're actually going to be meeting with the auditor staff tomorrow. But yeah, Summer, Robin, if you want to kind of cover that document at high level overview, the difference between the ending fund balance, and that's really what the difference is. Just the way in which that ending fund balance is being tracked and reported out to. So we look forward to meeting tomorrow and drawing that closer in together.
Okay.
Sure. So the information that you've received outlines the process. And basically what we do in July of every year, when all the rest of the budget is being entered into the budget system, all offices and departments have to enter their estimated beginning fund balance for the following year. So we do the same for general fund. The estimate's done in July. And then as the year progresses, as commissioners know, we update the forecast regularly so that when you're asked to make final decisions, you have the best possible, or at least the most recent estimate of where we're going to end the year. And begin the following year, so you know the resources that are available to you. So basically, the amount that goes into the budget book, and this is true for every fund, is not necessarily what you use to set the budget, because we do update those as the year goes. And as you know, in the spring of every year, you get the budget amendment where once the year has closed, again, every fund is adjusted for what the actual fund balance landed at.
Yeah, so we look forward to meeting with the auditor team and kind of walking that through. I think of this year with the information, each team gathering it a bit late, didn't allow for a lot of time to sit and chat prior to us having to meet these timelines, but look forward to doing that more in the future.
I have questions, but not in regard to I have just general questions that I don't need answers to it right now, but for the future, as we go into considerations. And is this an appropriate time to do it?
Absolutely.
Okay. My first question is, I guess, since we just heard from the assessor, is if we were to consider a levy lid lift, I guess I would like to know process, and how much, right? Like, what's our flexibility and a timeline for it? So just, that's an option that the board is going to consider. I would just like to know more information on it. I have a question in regards to the coroner's office and the forensic pathologist. I know we were working on, or he was working on a contract with that, right? And so I'm wondering with the forest, if we're able to contract that, does the autopsy rate that we're paying into, right, does it have to be as large, or can we see some savings there as a possibility, right? Instead of us having to put in 600,000, can we put in less? What does that look like? And then another question I have is I know we set aside some funds for retirement. And so last we heard from it, it was that it was quite a healthy balance. And so I would like to see kind of, do we need to increase the rate of that fund, or can some of those funds be reverted back to the general fund? If we're not seeing that, like, what is our flexibility when it comes to that retirement fund? I know that we've been.
Is that the cash leaves? Is that what they're referring to?
It's the cash out.
Paying 25% of cash outs.
Just want to make sure I understood.
Yes, and so I just would like to see, like, if.
Like a pilot program.
Yeah, do we?
Yeah, we can take a look at the fund.
And so, and then I guess, in seeing the vacancy rates with corrections, right? And I know they've been struggling, and so, I guess I'll bring back the conversation of regional corrections, right? And seeing cost savings if we're able to contract with another jurisdiction there, and maybe have some of those positions covered. I kind of just, I guess, would like just a general update. I know that there was a discussion with the city of Olympia to do a possible pilot, but as we're crunching down on time and the possibility of you know, inching our budget down, I think it's valuable to have that perspective of, like, we need those positions if there is a contract, you know, a jurisdiction coming in and contracting with us. So just having a general conversation about that. Those were all my questions. Again, I don't need answers. I know they're quite a bit, but as we're having these conversations and we're going into deliberations, it's something I would like to have more information on. Thank you.
Chair, being I can't see exactly if anybody else has got their hand up, so.
Go ahead, Commissioner Edwards, and then I'll get Commissioner Fournier.
Okay. On this TC Connect issue that was brought up by the sheriff's office, how is that possible? I mean, that kind of scares me that we could have that kind of a discrepancy with the same information either added in or requested. And how are we going to know that we aren't having bigger mistakes made? I mean, I understand she's going to go with the higher number because that makes sense to make it safe, but it kind of scares me that, are we faced with this in other areas, and pretty soon, oh gosh, we ended up with a TC Connect mistake here and it was $2 million or whatever. I mean, so it makes me nervous, and I guess not knowing everything about it. So I'm certainly not in the know, and maybe you folks that are can realize that, well, it's not really the big issue I'm thinking it is. Could you touch on that?
Sure, Commissioner Edwards, thanks so much for asking that question. As Heidi mentioned, that's something she found yesterday, I think she said. So she's running that to ground. We are asking all our budget teams to make sure that they're checking on the data. And the sheriff's department isn't the only department that's found some discrepancies, and then they work with auditor and our budget team. And as I mentioned, our third-party integrator, Cedar, to identify if there's mistakes and how to fix those mistakes. That's normal through any data migration. We are having our fair share of it right now, and so working it through. And so I don't think that what Heidi identified is unusual in the sense that there are data reconciliation discussions and issues that are still being resolved right now. And that's going to be for some time because there's a lot of financial data that comes over to the system, and then we're working it through and evaluating, and it really is our push and pull in this transition. Information is being worked through, and there's a lot of details that still need to be evaluated.
Auditor Hall?
Yeah, Darren is researching that right now. So we should have more information by our meeting tomorrow, Leonard.
Yeah, and so it's not, I mean, and we would give a lot of credit to Darren. So Heidi bringing it up this morning, totally understand, but the auditor's team has been very responsive to these types of issues, and it's normal for it to take a few days to run to ground.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. Commissioner Fournier.
Yeah, I just want to say I appreciate everybody coming today and presenting. And kind of, I know that everybody's listening, and everybody's got needs, and then I just can't help but think about several times throughout the year when, at the commission level, we tried to come up ways to create new revenue options and work with different electeds to look at, ways to create outside revenue. And it just feels like there's a general reluctance to have those discussions. And it's really important that we allow people to get creative and find new ways to bring in money to the county. And it really stresses it when we get to these discussions. I too, like Commissioner Mejia, would like to have more talk about what the assessor said, but with regard to a levy lift, but I'm also reluctant to talk about increasing, tax revenue when we've got a lot of internal efficiencies that need to be worked out. The facilities needs are going to increase, I feel, and the atrium costs are going to increase, I feel. And like those kinds of things we can't get out of, but we need to be having that discussion as well.
Okay, any other comments from the board?
Well, I guess I'd just follow up on Commissioner Fournier's comments. I agree. We need to do something, but in the meantime, and you've all heard me, I'm like a broken record on this. We do need to develop trust as much as we possibly can with the public. And if we're going to ask the public to support an issue, something in which they're going to get a chance to vote on, I think we need to make sure we've cleaned house on whatever issues there could be pending that might come up. So, things like, well, where are we going to be at our next exit interview with the state auditor? And, we certainly wouldn't want to be moving forward with something at the same time we've just been slapped again with 3-4 findings or something like that. So I think it's ever so important that we get it right as we move forward. I'll just let it go at that for now. Thank you.
I think, yeah, you're right. Timing's important. And, when you're waiting for the next shoe to drop, it's hard to plan.
If I could just mention that, we're aware that in this audit report that there's going to be some findings for public health. And we're working through with Rob and with Dr. Freiheit. Robin's also helping out with their fiscal team to provide support. They've been impacted by the TC Connect dynamic as well. But, you know, our commitment is to dial operations in. I appreciate Rob's support of Jen and Jen's commitment to looking at how do we do that. The public health fiscal team's hard work. But I think, you know, our ability to learn from these situations and then better respond as we go forward and working as a team, getting some systems in place, policies and procedures, I think will help everybody.
I think I would like to point out that the audit findings that are being referred to were efforts by the board to protect the general fund because of the revenue limitations that we have based on advice we had from our attorney. So it's a direct product of the situation that we're trying to address. And I would hope the public wouldn't see it in any other light or see it as a reason not to support our basic needs, because it was county commissioners and staff's effort to try to meet those needs with the very limited revenue sources we have, and so many of which have restrictions. So Commissioner Edwards, I'm sure you have a response to that. So
well, I guess I would just say the tough thing that we're faced with is the next audit findings that, or if there are audit findings coming up, it's going to be based on things that we have already done and mistakes that we have already made. And so it isn't like we can go back and fix it. I think we just need to be very upfront and maybe talk about it if we know something's coming, maybe talk about it ahead of time and maybe why it happened or how it happened. But Commissioner Menzer, like you say, I mean, we've got a lot of reasons we're trying to jockey things around to make everything fit. And when we finally do get to the point that we are going to tell that story to the public, it can't be too complicated, because then the public won't necessarily understand. And we have to be able to put together something to show that, well, we had these things pointed out to us, and boy, here's what we've been doing, and we're trying to get ahead of this. We've got new folks and new positions. Maybe that can help. I don't know. Just, I think we really need to be paying attention to what's coming before we move ahead with an ask. And I'm not against moving ahead with the ask. I just want to make sure any questions that might pop up, we've got good answers for and explanations for. So just food for thought. That's all.
thank you, sir. Sounds good. Anything else before we break this morning? We do have commissioner check-in at 2 p.m. Is that correct? And it's not a budget related. It's a normal commissioner's check-in. I didn't see the agenda.
Yes, one brief. Just a regular commissioner's check-in. It includes one briefing.
Employee benefits.
Yeah, there's one item added, CHR benefits.
Somewhat budget related.
Somewhat budget. So I'm just on time checking. I probably have to leave no later than 4. Do we think we need 2.5 hours?
More than that. That presentation will probably take 15 minutes.
Okay.
And then questions from board members.
Perfect. Thank you. So we've come to the end of this morning's agenda. Unless there's a commissioner item that's burning, we'll have time for that this afternoon. So we're adjourned.